Welcome back to the COVENTRY'S podcast. Today, I'm joined by Coventry fan Alex as we look ahead to Saturday's fixture. Coventry City is over 140 years old, and you've enjoyed some incredible moments in your history. An FA Cup win in 1987, a 34-year stay in English football, and founding members of the Premier League. However, since relegation in 2001, you've never returned to the Premier League and have had some challenging times. Is this the year?
Think it is, mate. To be honest, look, you can look at recent games. We've struggled a little bit, losing to Ipswich twice. Norwich just looks like we don't like the teams of East Anglia. But losing to Birmingham as well wasn't great away from home at the turn of the year. But to be fair, I think you just have to look at how well we started the season. There is a really good squad there. Frank Lampard has built a really good team, and I think this must be the year. I think it is tight at the top. Middlesbrough are just 3 points behind us. Ipswich, despite losing a couple of games recently, have been creeping up themselves. Still a lot of football to be played, but right now I feel like this is the season. I've said it since about October. And it'd be brilliant. You just went over it there. We haven't been in the Premier League since 2001. I was born in 2003, and I've experienced Championship football, League One, League Two. So to be back in the Premier League would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly there about your stint in League Two. Could you see the club falling into non-league during that time?
I think so, yeah. I think a lot of people, if you ask them, they will talk about the playoff final against Exeter. A lot of people think that if we hadn't won that, we'd have either been stuck in League Two for a while or slipped into non-league. It was a really, really weird time to be a fan. I went to so many places that, I'd never been to before, never been since, going through the teams that were in League Two. I saw us lose 6-2 to Yeovil, who are now in the National League. They dropped into the National League South. And look, I know Yeovil have been in the Championship in their history, but they went on to get relegated out of the Football League. The last game of the season, we played Morecambe, who are now really struggling at the bottom of the National League. That was a 0-0 draw. I remember going there, losing 2-0 in December of that season. And it just... some of the games, some of the teams we were playing against, and no offence to them, it was complete night and day. We were by far the biggest club in the league, and you look at Notts County, who were probably the second biggest club in that league, who we beat in the playoff semi-final. Two clubs that shouldn't be in the fourth tier of English football. Notts County are actually still down there. They slipped into non-league, and that could have easily have been us if we'd have turned up to Meadow Lane and lost that night, or even lost at Wembley against Exeter. So, yeah, and as a Coventry fan, I'd have hated for us to have been in non-league. As someone that loves following the club, I think it would have been an even bigger journey watching us play in non-league. So I'm glad that we never did drop into non-league in a way. But, I look back in the League Two days and even some of the League One days with a little bit of novelty that I actually really enjoyed going to these places. To an extent, it'll always be highlighted as having bad home fans, and I was a season ticket holder for all them seasons. I enjoyed going to them games. There was never, I said it's very lightly, there was never really a time I didn't enjoy because, hey, I would have stopped going. But I think, you've got to look at how far we've come from then and now, and it could have been the complete opposite, really. Like you say, the question that you asked about 2 minutes ago before Waffled was, could we have dropped into non-league? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly about also Coventry's troubles at home, where you
Yeah.
effectively were homeless for a period of time. What was it like during that period as a Coventry fan?
Well, for me, I was young enough to not be old enough to go to Northampton on my own, and I had a dad that didn't want to travel 34 miles every week, and I still understand that to this day. So when we left the Rico for the first time, moved to Northampton, it was really weird. I couldn't get my head around it because I wasn't old enough to understand the logistics. And after a season, and we played a couple of games at the start of the, it was 14-15 season, at Northampton, we returned to the Rico, beat Gillingham 1-0, brilliant night, and just about stayed up on the final day. Young James Maddison scoring a goal against Crawley. And then we had a season after that, which, to be honest, I look back at it and think that was when I thought things were going to make a turn round, 15-16 season. We had a team of James Maddison, Joe Cole, Adam Armstrong, Jacob Murphy, Jack Stevens. We had an unreal team. We were top of the league around Christmas. We ended up finishing 8th in League One. That was after Ryan Kent went back to Liverpool and we started signing the likes of Peter Ramage and Stephen Hunt. After that, we were literally on free fall. The club dropped to League Two the season after, and we came back the first time of return. But then, we weren't improving. There was no improvement on the pitch, and we were just kind of settling for being a League One side, it felt. And I think we would never have played in Birmingham had that Madison Armstrong side that I just spoke about got themselves promoted, which unfortunately they didn't. Tony Mowbray ended up leaving. And then the 1920 season, we moved to Birmingham because of the troubles again. Obviously, the Wasps owned the Rico, the council, who will now, and I don't want to get into politics. I think there's a lot of politics in it as well, but the council, who will now always say they support the club, did nothing to support the club at the time. They owned the stadium. We wanted to buy 50% of it. They were kind of pushing us off and ended up selling to the London Wasps Rugby Club, who, it would have made more sense for them to play at Loftus Road than the Rico, right? It was a really weird time. But yeah, in the end, the Wasps ended up going bust, which is brilliant. I'll always laugh about that. There's the seasons at Birmingham, I went to every single game. I was part of the 375 fans that turned up on a Tuesday night to watch us beat South London's under 21s in the leasing.com trophy at the time. So yeah, loads of ups and downs. 2 wins at Wembley in that period that I just spoke about as well, which will always be remembered for me as one of my best days supporting the club. So look, a lot of negatives going to Birmingham. I hate to say it, the only people that were really going were the fans that loved the club so much they couldn't go, or those that just wanted a day out drinking in Birmingham. And it was an away day every single week. And we actually won the league the first season as well, which was a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah, especially doing it at probably one of your biggest rivals' ground as well.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. Like, we were going into Birmingham City pubs before the game and sitting in the Birmingham City homestand, and we actually played Birmingham in the FA Cup. It was, honestly, you talk about cup draws being scripted. I think the most scripted one you'll ever see is us magically drawing Birmingham City at home and put the home in kind of quotation marks when we were playing at St Andrews. Absolutely typical. Talk about a fixed cup draw, a 0-0 draw. We then played them away. I think it was 2-2, and we lost on penalties. So yeah, talk about a fixed cup draw there.
Yeah, it's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Looking a bit now towards the present day, Mark Robins had quite a phenomenal time, it could be said, at Coventry. He reached the playoffs in his last 2 seasons, and that FA Cup semi-final, which I know a lot of fans will feel Coventry were controversially denied on that day. Tell us about what Robins did for Coventry.
Well, I'll start at the beginning of his second run. I don't really want to go over his first run when he was only here for a little while and went off elsewhere, where he was probably backed more by an owner and was probably able to sign the players he wanted to. That was the issue at first. He came in off the back of, I think we'd had 3 or 4 managers at this point. We were rock bottom or there or thereabouts in League One, but we'd secured a cup final at Wembley, the Checker Trade Trophy at the time. So yeah, Robins comes in. You could have brought in any manager in world football, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho. We were going down. By that point, we were going down. But we were down and out pretty much. It was probably, I think, middle of March. I think we just held on for a 0-0 draw at Shrewsbury, which was one of the highlights of that season. We go on to Wembley, beat Oxford 2-1, which was, infinitely the highlight of that season. And that was, for me, the start of the Robins era, really. Changes the team, keeps a couple of key players, but changes the team in League Two. We weren't phenomenal, I'll be honest. We weren't phenomenal. We weren't world beaters. We probably didn't have the top 10 wage budget in the 4th tier of English football. We relied on a lot of academy lads, players that come in on a free, and a couple of loans from Premier League teams to get us over the line, get us up to League One. The first season back in League One was the last season at the Rico. before we moved to St Andrews, and Mark Robins just was building a team, and I think it was doing whatever he could on a shoestring budget. I think the recruitment was really good from the likes of Kyle McFadzean, Dom Hyam, Callum O'Hare comes in on a loan the season after from Aston Villa. And over time, he's building this team that ended up having the likes of Gustavo Hamer, Victor Gyökeres, and would go on to have the likes of Ellis Sims, Hadji Wright. And again, under Sisu, we were backed very little. Any money that was spent was very, very minimal. Eventually, Doug King takes over as the owner. And this was just coming off the back of the successful seasons, I'd say, in the Championship. Because when we got back to the Championship, the goal was just to stay up and see where we could get. And again, we talk about the playoff final against Luton. It wasn't a great day. Dabo gets a lot of stick, or got a lot of stick at the time for missing the penalty. And I mean this in no disrespect, but Dabo simply wasn't good enough to be at the club. Ability-wise, in a top 6 playoff position, he was really, really good in League One. And the reason I say this is because it probably shows the position we were in at the time. We'd just come from promotion to League One, promotion from League Two to League One. A couple of seasons later, promotion to the Championship. And this all happened very, very quickly. And Dabo was a brilliant player in the League One, went on to get injured. Realistically, we'd kind of not fluked our way, but we were punching above our weight. Dabo, as good of a player as he was not, knocking on the door of Premier League ability at that point in his career. And look, again, there's loads of what ifs. If Gustavo Hamer hadn't gone off injured, would we have won the game? If Casey Palmer hadn't gone off injured, would we have won the game? Loads of different scenarios. Yeah, that Luton game wasn't great. Luton went up to the Premier League and now in League One, so I'd much rather be in the position we're in now. And then that Man United game, I think it's probably the most Jekyll and Hyde football game I've ever been a part of, really, just even as a spectator. I spoke to a Millwall fan about this last week, and the way he described it was the biggest robbery in recent years. VAR, it's not a big part in the Championship. It's not a part at all, in the Championship. But it played a big part in that. And I think that was the beginning of the end, really, for Mark Robins in his spell. He did a lot at the club, brought in a lot of good players over his tenure that brought us up. But I think after that Man United game, just nothing was ever the same. And I think, when he was sacked in November of 2024, I think a lot of people were shocked in the wider football world. I was as well. I wasn't happy with the decision. I was unhappy when we actually brought Mark Robins back to the club. So I'm proven wrong quite a lot, really. But I think, after 7 years, it was probably the right time to go, and he's doing a good enough job at Stoke right now. I know they've got a wealthy owner that wants to back the team, and I think eventually they probably will find themselves back in the Premier League. And whether that's under Mark Robins or not, I think he is still right now the right man for the Stoke job. So I wish him all the best. It was probably the right time for him to go. Again, the memories that those fans have got from his tenure is just nothing short of just excellent, really.
Lampard now has obviously come in and looks like he may achieve that last push that eluded Robins. Have you seen any differences in how Lampard has managed Coventry in comparison to Robins?
I think yes. Firstly, I think Lampard is very much more of an ambitious person, manager. One thing I disliked about Mark Robins, and I think Stoke fans will probably agree with me here, he's quite negative sometimes. If he'd lose a game, he'd kind of blame it on different scenarios and things like that. But I know this isn't directly, me speaking about football and him as a manager, but I think that's a big thing that I notice. I think he gets the best out of certain players that Mark Robins maybe didn't as well. There were certain things that Mark Robins wouldn't like to do in the game, little things like we'll have Milan Van Uyk do a long throw. That's led to a couple of goals this season, and actually one against Mark Robins' Stoke side last season. So, I think that came to bite him in the backside. That was something that Mark Robins was totally against. He didn't want certain set plays like long throws. It's funny, he's a Stoke manager, the merchants of the long throw. And then think of other little things, but I think The way we play is very similar, really. I think the players that we've got, obviously we've brought in Matt Grimes as well, and he dictates the game massively in the midfield. So yeah, I think the playing squad changing has a little bit of a difference in how we set up. But I think for me, Lampard's a little bit more of a positive manager, wants to play attacking football, and that's something that Robbins probably wasn't so much keen on. He was more possession based. But yeah, I mean, again, there's lots of differences. I think when a new manager comes in, there's a lot of ambition and a lot of optimism. When you look at Mark Robbins from the start, the very start, he'd play a five at the back, want to play possession, and that changed. And over 7 years, he's playing all these different formations, and he's got all these different players with loads of different abilities. So it changes over the years, and I think it got to a point where I think he was a little bit stuck. I think he was a little bit not upset, but I think the FA Cup semi-final and kind of the ending to that season was a little bit deflating, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I just don't think we ever bounced back from that. And then when Lampard comes in with a little bit of ambition, we start getting wins together, and we find ourselves in the playoffs. Because hey, if you'd have asked me, I'm even saying this time last year, where I think we'd have finished, I would never have thought we'd have finished in the top six last season. So I think that little bit of ambition that Lampard's brought is absolutely massive. And I mean, look, I hate to say it, I think if he does get us promoted, it'd be a little bit bittersweet on Mark Robbins for the job he's done. It might be a little bit overlooked. But if Mark Robbins couldn't do it in the time he did and Lampard's come in, then it's the right decision. However, I can flip the switch and say if Lampard doesn't get us promoted from this point, it'd be very hard to call it a success. So right now, just being positive, I think he has been a good addition to the club. Obviously, his name as well, Frank Lampard, one of the best midfielders, especially of my younger years. So he's doing a good job now, and hopefully it continues.
Yeah, no, 100%. The job he's done with Coventry, I think, it pains me to say, obviously, him being his links to Chelsea, but he's done an incredible job. Looking back again, you mentioned Grimes playing a key role within midfield. Do you feel he filled that gap which Hamer left and how pivotal he was?
I'll probably say yes and no. I think they're very different players. Hamer's a little bit more attacking, will play on the front foot. Grimes will like to sit back, play short passes, join the back four if needed. But at the same time, yes, as different as they are as players, we had a midfielder who ran the show, knew what they were doing. I think they just do it in very different ways. And as you know, Gustavo Hamer would very much be involved in goals and assists. Matt Grimes probably not so much, but especially goals. I've never known someone to be able to play a 35-yard pass so perfectly and then on goal not have a clue what he's doing. I'm not sure if Grimes has even scored a goal for this season, but yeah, a really, really good midfielder. And I think he actually really was the replacement for Ben Sheaf, a player that I wouldn't say we've missed so much this season, having Grimes in the squad. Had we, I don't know, added Gustavo Hamer in the summer or even in the January transfer window, I think they'd play together a little bit better than, if we had Sheaf and Grimes. I think they're too similar of a player. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at it could be his 50th game already for the Sky Blues, Matt Grimes. And he only signed, just under a year ago, probably about a year ago. It was last January transfer window. So I think that just shows how pivotal he's been. I think he's played every single league game. I might be wrong. There might be one or two that he's missed. But I think that just shows how pivotal he's been to this squad and how much of an influence he's had on the rest of the squad as well. He was a brilliant player for Swansea for many years. Obviously, we saw him in that side that made the playoffs and unfortunately weren't promoted for them. So hopefully this season it can change and he can finally get promoted up to the Premier League.
Yeah, he's been joined in midfield by Victor Torp, who, from a neutral perspective, I think has been Coventry's arguably best player this season. And with 11 goal contributions from the middle, it's outstanding, including that one against QPR, which was a very, very nice strike. What have you made of his season?
Well, I think Torp's one of them players who will either have a really good game and or just will go missing a little bit. I like Torp. He's one of my favourite players, and we speak about that Man United game a minute ago. He was the one that actually scored the goal. Hadji Wright was the one who was, I put this in quotation marks as well, offside, but it was Victor Torp who put the ball in the back of the net. And up until that point, I mean, he'd signed in that January transfer window. So up until that point, to be honest, he'd gone a little bit under the radar, not had much game time under Mark Robbins, but he's really grown as a player over this past year. I'm not just going to say this past season. And I think he links up well with Matt Grimes in midfield. I think he is a little bit more like Gustavo Hamer, will contribute more to goals, like you've said, 11 goal contributions this season, and loves the strike from outside the box. Some of his goals are absolutely unreal. Honestly, you could put together a Victor Torp highlight reel of some of his goals, and it would be absolutely unreal, some of his finishes. But yeah, he's been injured a little bit this season, which hasn't helped. But I mean, he has got back into form, got 90 minutes, his first 90 minutes since Boxing Day against Norwich, just gone Monday night. So it'd be good to see him get another 90 at Loftus Road. Hopefully see him get a goal as well, because I don't think he's had a goal in quite a while. He started the season really well, and obviously his injury hasn't helped. But look, a really good midfielder. Is he suitable for the Premier League? This is a question that I'm asking about a lot of our players. I know it's very prematurely. I'm not too sure. This is probably, no disrespect to where he's played before in Belgium, and I think he's played in Denmark and countries like that. Is he up for the Premier League? I'm not too sure. I'd probably say the Championship's the best level he's played at this point, but I think it all remains to be seen. He has been decent this season, and for me, I have to agree, he's one of our better players.
Yeah, like I said, when he played against QPR that day, phenomenal. But with him now coming back into form, hopefully it's not a repeat Saturday. But last time out, we mentioned Coventry beat QPR 7-1. What did you make of QPR on that day?
I mean, I hate to look. I always want to be nice. I always want to be nice, don't I? You got a goal. Is what I've got to say. I'll flip the question, because I don't want to sit here and say QPR were terrible, because I know that's not a true reflection on QPR, and you've done okay. You're up and in around mid-table, around the playoffs, and I've seen QPR play many times, and you're never an easy team to play. The context of that game and how QPR were and how we were, I think it was just one of them days. We bought the CBS arena that day. We'd never owned the stadium before. Well, we technically owned the land before the stadium was built. We ended up selling it on before we'd even kicked the ball in that stadium. Funnily enough, first game ever played there was a 3-0 win against QPR. And then, 20 years later, we end up beating you 7-1. So it was a bit of a full circle moment. And a little fact, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, that was the most goals scored by a team at CBS Arena since Coventry scored 6 against Bury.
Wow.
In that Joe Cole, Adam Armstrong season. And I was a little bit gutted. I know it sounds really silly, a little bit gutted that QPR got the late goal, because it meant that it was not our biggest ever win. But luckily for you joined with Bury. But yeah, I mean, to give an impression on QPR over the season, I think you've, to be honest, actually have us to thank a little bit, because since that one, when it was a little bit of a kick up the backside, I mean, to be fair, you've not been great as of late, but you went on a really good run after that. And I think, not to say we helped you, I don't want to put it all down on us, but I think the players deserved a bit of a kick up the backside. It could have gone the other way, and you could have really fell into a rut, as we've seen a lot of, I'll say this, good sides like Sheffield United and Norwich do this season, where even Southampton, they haven't started the best, and they're now in a position where they're probably a little bit out of the pack. I think QPR are a little bit closer to them playoffs, only 4 points away from Wrexham. So a lot of positives to look at that QPR side. You got a lot of good players. I've always rated Ilias Chair. Been a little bit confused, no disrespect to QPR, why he's still there. And I used Gustavo Hamer and Victor Gyökeres as 2 examples, 2 players that, when I saw them play 4 or 5 years ago, I thought they can play at a better level, or they can move on and test themselves at better level. And it's strange that Ilias Chair hasn't done that. I mean, I remember going to Loftus Road a few years ago. I think it was a 1-1 draw. I mean, Ilias Chair ran the show for me for Queen's Park Rangers that day. And there was other days where I turned up to Loftus Road. I think it was a 3-0 win when we had Gyökeres and Hamer. We were absolutely flying. And the only player that really stood out to me on that QPR side that day was Ilias Chair. And again, I want to bring up Justin Abiku as well, a player that we've had in our academy, only 21 years old. A player that, to be honest, on my impression, I've not got much to say about him. He's played 20 games for Lincoln this year, scored 3 goals, been at Grimsby a little bit. But a player that, is 21 years old and is probably going to go on to at least establish himself as a decent Football League striker. And I think he's a little bit of an unknown, really, to a lot of Coventry fans. Had scored a few goals in friendlies, but other than that, not really kicked on in the league. And I think he could be a player that, given game time at QPR, could potentially move up to that next level. You've obviously brought players in from League One before that have improved. Poku, for example, who has been injured a little bit this season and might be one of them players that will go on to have a really good career in the Championship. But I think they just need to be given the chance, and I think Abiku's the right person for that. And Richard Kone as well is a player that I'm quite impressed with. I think he was a really, really good signing in the summer. Again, I think was he unfit at the start of the season? He was a little bit unfit at the start of the season. Yeah. And that was probably around the time he played us. So it was just early on in the season, probably the wrong impression of QPR. I think Saturday will be more of a better impression on QPR. And if we beat you 7-1 again, then I am probably going to get the impression that you're not one of the better teams in the league, let's just say. But I think you're a decent side. I think had we beat Sheffield Wednesday 7-1, then I would be sitting here saying they're the worst team in the league, because honestly, that's what they are. And that's no disrespect to them. It's just the situation they find themselves in.
Yeah, no, I think Wednesday have had a torrid time this season with all that's gone on off the pitch, and especially now with Barry Bannon departing to Millwall as well. That's going to hurt them even more. What's your score prediction?
It's not going to be 7-1. However, I do think we need a win. We're coming off a loss away at Norwich. We haven't won it away from home in this calendar year, and that's including the FA Cup. We got a point away at Charlton and literally scraped a point. Lost against Birmingham away from home to 3 goals that I thought were quite avoidable. It was just sloppy defending, and all credit to them. I mean, even before that, the last time we won away from home, actually, just looking at it now, was the 25th of November against Middlesbrough, a 4-2 win. So for a team at the top of the league, that rut has to stop, and I think it is going to be at Loftus Road. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win. I think it will probably be a goal in the first half, a goal in the second half. Not the prettiest of games. But look, anything can happen. QPR aside, I feel like a little bit better now than they were in August when we played them. I don't think it'll be easy. But 2-0 is my prediction, because we have to, if we want to be at the top of the league, we have to start putting in a good performance, bringing a performance to sides that are lower down in the table than us. Because look, Middlesbrough are 3 points behind us. They've got Norwich coming up this weekend, and Ipswich are creeping up the table. They've got a Preston side who've lost their past 3 games. So we have to look at them fixtures and think, right, we need to start moving away from them, because very quickly we could go from sitting top of the league to being in the playoffs. And to be honest, as a Coventry fan, the last thing I want is to be in the playoffs after our recent playoff performances. So my prediction at Loftus Road is 2-0.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for hopping on.
Thank you.